How dare you wear last year's colors? Are you nuts? That's dead. That's dead. Burn those things. Give them to the Salvation Army. Get some new clothes, honey. You know, this is the anarchist. Okay, never allowing those things that no longer function to survive. When we get to the limited perspective, and this is the dilemma of the material plane, is that the material plane is always rooted in pessimism. I will never be able to earn what I want to earn. I will never be able to get to the position I want to get to. I will never be able to grow my business into an empire. I will never. And it's always there underneath. And it's not so much that, it's often the other side of it. You know, here I am, I've developed this great product, but I really don't think that human beings are smart enough to recognize its value. It's the other side of the pessimism. The only reason my widget didn't sell is they're too stupid out there to see that it's good for them, you know? In other words, there is the underlying pessimism, and often the pessimism gets in the way of people being successful. Yeah, it's a great idea, but no, I could never materialize it. No, I would never work. Nah, nobody would ever buy it. Nah, I won't. And on and on and on. You know, and of course, most of that is when you're dealing with third-line children, third-line profile children, who have a natural tendency to the material plane, and I'll talk about that after. You know, that the moment they have the negative conditioning that they're punished for their mistakes, and you know, there is concern that they're not getting things right, and so forth and so on, they build up an early pessimism that says, you know, I'm never going to be able to do my dream. I'm always going to have to work for somebody. And most of the workers we have, that's what it's rooted in. It's rooted in the pessimism that they can't do better. I mean, think about that. You know, and again, you can see that if we're dealing with certain centers as profit centers, you know, we can see that there are ways of trying to get them to feel like they can do better, will do better, should do better, you know, on and on and on. All the sales pitches that come. The aspire to role, sustainment. And this is the whole thing about, you know, the material way. You don't want it suddenly to fall apart. I mean, what you really want is that it's going to sustain, it's going to grow, you know, that you can finally have on your bottle, your package, you know, founded in 1826, you know, 7,000 years at the same corner, selling the same product, whatever the case may be. Sustainment in the sense that it not only sustains in its movement, that there is a consistent material way, but something very magical, that it sustains others. Others. You know, it's one of the principles of predatory capitalism, is that even at its worst, even in the times of the robber baron, people who never had work suddenly had work. In other words, there is a sustainment. Remember, it's third line. It's not like the third line cares. It's self-absorbed, it's in its own process, it's making money for itself. But one of the byproducts of their journey is that they can sustain others by the very sustainment of their material way. If they keep on adapting, if they keep on staying attuned, they will grow. You know, this is feeding the instrument. And they will grow, and out of that growth they can sustain others. Bonding strategy. Bonds made and broken. Bonds made and broken. Security strategy. Bonds made and broken. Ah, the world of contracts. I don't know if I want to talk about this. Bonds made and broken. Bonds made and broken. Bonds made and broken. You know, and it's one of the things to understand about our relationships on the material plane. The hardest thing to do is to make money with somebody else as a partner. It's the hardest thing to do. It really is. I mean, everything that I've asked for in terms of the business development of human design has been accentuated on the independence of organizations, you know, the integrity of that, because this is so powerful. Bonds made and broken. And it's something to understand about the third line. See, contracts are made to be broken. That is clear. That's always clear because that's the nature of the not-self, after all. Not only that, but there are legitimate ways in which contracts can be broken. Truly legitimate ways. If you're a third-line being, you're meant to enter into correctly what can go wrong. Remember, if you're not self, you enter into the wrong thing that's guaranteed to go wrong. So if you're the not self and you enter into a bond, you can be guaranteed that it's going to be broken. Now, whether that is sexual, whether that is personal, whether that is business, whatever the case may be. You know, people wonder why that in the largest and most successful capitalist state in history, America, that it has 70% of the world's lawyers. 70% of the world's lawyers. Can you imagine? 70%. Right? I mean, they have enough lawyers to service 4.5 billion people and they look after 284 million. You know? I mean, if you see it in that perspective. And all of that is about the reality of the not-self. The not-self doesn't enter into things correctly. It doesn't. So one of the things is if you are third-line thematic and you are living out your design and you enter into something correctly and it's going to come to an end that will be natural and not unhealthy. Bonds made and broken is not unhealthy. However, there is something very interesting to recognize about an evolving business principle that is rooted in these very powerful themes. And that evolving business principle is networking. Networking and limited engagement employment. Bonds made and broken, made and broken, made and broken, made and broken, made and broken. In other words, independent organs operating in harmony together through a network system. And in that, bonds can be made and broken and made and broken. This is, specific agreement based rather than generalized base. Nonetheless, when you're looking at the third line, what you're looking at is you're looking at the true underlying thematic of the material way. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this combination of third line themes, we're going to combine it with our profit centers, and then we're going to look at the individual thematics of each and every one of the gates according to their centers. But I'm not going to do that now. I'm going to stop and we're going to have a break. Okay. Are you ready? Thank you. Ask the question and the generator will give you the truth. Okay. All right, we're going to begin our journey. We're going to start with the head center. We're going to start with the question mark. We're going to start with the most powerful market. That is, we know that 79% of humanity has an open head center. They really don't know how to distinguish whether or not there is a question for them. Those of you that participated yesterday in my putting you in the place of the questioner, understanding how important questions are. And basically because there are so many answers that are possible, there are so many things that are of interest to humanity through the conditioning of having an open head center. So in starting with the head center, I'm not simply starting at the top, I'm not simply starting with the biggest market, but I'm talking about 3 gates that in many ways are archetypes, are real archetypes of the whole money-making process. So we're going to look at them gate by gate, and we're going to look at them through the line theme, and I'm going to begin with the 64th gate. I'm going to begin with the abstract. Now remember something, when we're dealing with collective circuitry, we're dealing with sharing. In other words, that the way you make money with sharing is that you get the other person to want to share with you. In other words, they want to share with you. They want to share with you because what you have has value. And when you're looking at the abstract collective, what you want to share is the value of the past. The value of the past. In other words, this is something, inspiration based on the past. And in looking at that, we come to the third line, and the third line, well, it's just one of those great archetypes. It's called overextension. Overextension. The wisdom to recognize when one has not the necessary resources to complete transition. Such timely awareness may give it a chance to seek assistance. Okay. So it's one of the things to recognize about the nature of the third line thematic for inspiration of the past. Remember, I want to take you away from individualizing the third line as you have it in your design, or if you don't have it in your design. I really want you to see we're talking about themes. So we're talking about the theme of abstract inspiration is overextension. Now think about the trial and error discovery. You discover that people are overextending themselves and don't need to. Well, how can you inspire them? You can sell them a treadmill to walk on in their house. That's one side of overextension, so that they don't overextend themselves, overextend their back, overextend this, overextend that. That overextension is about recognizing based on the past that in order to be successful financially, you're going to need assistance. That you don't have the resources based on the past to do things alone. You don't. So just because you've been working at this job and that's your past, doesn't mean you really know what's possible for you. There's all kinds of applications of that third line theme. So when you start on the abstract side, you're starting with a basic thing, overextension. And what you have to realize is that most human beings, 79%, that most human beings are in some way or another overextended. They're overextended at the bank. They're running a credit too long. Whatever the case would be, overextended. And again, I want you to move away from the line. I want you to take the keynote, if there is one for the line, take that keynote with the value of the third line, to be attuned to overextension. See, if you have an inspiration, how can I keep people from being overextended? How can I show people that they don't have enough resources based on past history? How can I inspire them to see that they can only benefit from their relationship with others? How can I inspire them to the kind of assistance they need in order to be successful? And on and on. And it's not based on anything other than seeing them in trouble. In other words, one of the things to recognize about the material way is that everyone needs assistance. Everyone needs assistance. Otherwise, we would have no legitimacy in consultancy. It's built into us that on our own, because remember, these are personal thematics for the material way, on our own, we're always overextended. Always. That's why we need tax accountants to help us to make our way through the maze of taxation. Why we need consultants to help us refine our business strategies and so forth and so on. In other words, built into understanding the material way is one of the main things about inspiration, is the inspiration to allow people to see that they can be successful with guidance, with assistance, and that no single person has enough resources on their own. They don't. They don't. And of course, it's one of the basic themes that's present in OC16 knowledge, is that financial development is something that requires a large transauric organism. Again, I'm only talking about personal potential here, but to really see that all of that begins to work out as we move out into the larger framework of the way in which we integrate with others in the material plane. Okay, so that's one side of the collective. Sharing inspiration about how to answer the question of how can I stop being overextended? How can I stop working so hard for so little? How can I stop being inefficient? How can I stop this and that and the other thing? In other words, it's a very important aspect to see on one side of the collective. If we go to the other side, if we go to the 63rd gate, when we go to the 63rd gate, remember, we're still dealing with sharing, but when we're looking at the logical collective, we're looking at the future. You know, we're looking at a movement and a pattern moving out, and that we're not dealing with the theme of confusion. I'm overextended, I'm confused, so help me. You know, this is the other side. What is the future? I'm full of doubt. I'm full of doubt. Okay, so you can see right away that to inspire people to get rid of their doubt is a huge moneymaker. And what is the theme of that? The theme of that is continuance. The dedication to the new beginning that insists on maintaining its achieved principles despite having to interact with those who have not attained such a state. In other words, if you're going to run a business, it's run from the top. It's not run from the bottom. It's so important to grasp this. The material way is purely hierarchical. It's purely hierarchical, and continuance, continuity in that sense, is maintained from the top, not from the bottom. Because the bottom rarely has the whole picture that the top has. They have aspects of the perspective. Their aspects are valuable in that perspective, but they themselves don't bring the continuity. So you can see these two sides of what needs to be shared. What needs to be shared is, look, you need assistance. You need assistance. It's very important. Without that assistance, you're always going to be overtaxed. You're always going to be overstrained. You know, you're not going to be able to carry the burden alone. That's why that even in our hunter-gatherer phase, we worked together. It was more productive. You know, so it's one of the things to understand, whether you are purely entrepreneurial in spirit or not, there is no way to inspire others on your own. You will be overtaxed. It won't work. You need assistance. I had to have assistance from the beginning. When you go to the other side and you see that what it is about is continuity, there's a shift. The past says to you, even though you're at the top, you need help. The future says to you, you stay on the top, because that's the only thing that's going to keep this moving. So this is very, very important to understand about your material success. You know, the lessons that can be learned. Anyway, let's move along here. I have 64 of them to do. I don't want to get stuck anywhere. I don't want to bore you all. I love this one. This is one of my main money-making sources. I mean, I am an open head center 61-1. I am here. I am here to offer occult knowledge to anyone who turns on my head center. You know, this is my job. You turn on my head center and I'll burble some occult knowledge out. I'll sell it to you. You know, I'll sell you first line knowledge. You know, I'll give you all the basics, I'll give you all the stuff, blah, 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 blah. But remember, the fact that I have the first line isn't the determinant of the thematic of this hexagram as a profit center. When we're looking at the 61, what we're seeing is the third line, and the third line is interdependence, and it's one of the great truths. It is exceedingly difficult for truth to stand alone. It's exceedingly difficult for truth to stand alone, which means that if you know something, you have to sell it. Think about that. You know, it's exceedingly difficult for truth to stand alone. The line itself says the ability to establish relationships for the actualization of truths, and through their nurturing and protective power to ensure a stable environment in which they can continue to grow. Even if you're a pure individual knower like me, look at the thematic of my 61-1. The thematic of my 61-1 is I've got to make money the third line way. Truth can't stand alone. I have to develop interdependent relationships. I have to have all of this. You. Here you are for me, you know? In other words, regardless of the fact, remember, I make money out of my not self, not out of my true self. My true self doesn't give a fuck about all this. It doesn't. It just wants to survive and run naked in the sun. Nothing else. You know, so the moment my 61-1 is just part of the shadow of my true self, I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not interested in any question. I'm not interested in inspiring anyone. As a matter of fact, if I see them coming up the hill, I go hide. Oh, I'll have to deal with them. But the fact that the only material way is through the third line theme, the third line theme says, the ability to establish relationships for the actualization of truth. I have to establish relationships? You know, and when I started this without that. You know, the blessing of Abisa and truly my dear sannyasin friends who had just learned how to hug, you know, and they thought that would be the best thing to teach me, you know. So I had all these sannyasins hugging me and, you know, bringing me into their family and, you know, the actualization of truth through relationships. And only when I was sort of in would they listen to the first line of the occult knowledge. Because only then could I sell it to them. Oh, the magic of seeing how this really works and what the not-self really is. And to see very clearly these three very dynamic themes, because I don't want to get into, you're all bright people, I don't want to get into extrapolating all the way down all the levels of enterprise that you can see in these three basic headings. But it's so important to understand that these three areas of inspiration, they dominate. They dominate. To be of assistance in this species is to find a legitimate way to earn a living, to be of assistance, to help people not be strained, you know, to help people not go overboard, to help people recognize what they have and what they can get from what they have, to show them that they can maintain their status in an evolutionary environment, that they can have continuity and success. But in order for them to establish truth in their life, in order for them to be successful in inspiring others with the truth, that they have to develop interrelated skills. All of that is a bedrock of making money. Teaching people how to have interrelated skills. You know, teaching people how to be guided in this life. You know, assuring people about the continuity of their focus and their power, and on and on and on and on and on. And it goes and it seeps down into every kind of area you can imagine. And it's covered by a vast patina that we call direct marketing. You know, we are constantly in a head center, not self world. That is the world of television, film, you know, the world of media, the world of propaganda, the world of the media is the massage. You know, Marshall McLuhan's dream come true. You know, this great media soup in which illusion is what's sold all the time. And here are the three illusions that are sold. I can help you. I can help you. I can help you make life easier. I can help you find the truth. I can help you stay on top. I can help you. I'm here to help you. Let me inspire you. You know, this is the biggest business on earth. You know where so much of that comes from, eh? I mean, religion uses it all the time. You know, all the time, all the time, all the time. Great propaganda. And after all, the third line, martyr line. It's really easy to sell. You know? I want to go from, and before I even take that step in my own breath, these are pressure centers that I'm starting with. I'm starting with the head. I'm going to go to the root. You have to recognize that the real advantage of the head center as a marketing environment is that this is a deep pressure. That being overtaxed is a deep pressure. Of being unable to establish truth is a deep pressure. Of being uncertain and doubtful of the future is a deep pressure. Of being insecure about your place in the process is a deep pressure. You know, the material plane, our pressure on the material plane is the head center above, but even more dynamically, because it includes tribal circuitry, and because it is a motor, is the root center. I have, over my 16 years now, no center has come to impress me more than the root. I see how extraordinarily powerful it is. And I see how it carries one of the greatest illusions of all, the illusion of, if I can get over this, I will be free. You know, this whole business of, you know, money for nothing and chicks for free. You know, get rich quick, you know, go over to Morocco and bring back 100 kilos, you know, do your movie, do it now, get it over with, and then you're free for the rest of your life. You may be free in a jail cell, but, you know, after all, third line, you know, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. You know, and it's the same thing for business. You know, I mean, if you can't face the threat of what can happen if you fail, then you can never really have the glory of the success. You can't. Okay, so I want to be able to move from the head center, which is, yes, it's a huge market, but it's a huge market at the deepest mental plane. And so it's a pressure on the not-self and on the way in which the not-self conceptualizes. So in that sense, when you're dealing with inspiration and the pressure of the head center, you're really, you know, looking at the world of illusion in the way in which it's presented to us. It's the world of illusion and the way it's presented to us. When you come down to the root center, wow, when you come down to the root center, you're coming down to something very, very powerful. This is not like the head. This is a motor. It's a very powerful motor. It's the adrenal system. It is stress. And everything about the major achievement of selling out of the root center is you're going to alleviate stress. You're going to get rid of the stress. You're going to get rid of the stress of a bad sex life. You're going to get rid of the stress of a good sex life. You're going to get rid of the stress of a bad financial life. You're going to get rid of, you know, on and on and on and on and on. Hey, it's one of my favorite pitches. I mean, I'm an open root person. You know, get over this not self and be free. I mean, don't you see my pitch? Don't you see where that comes from? That's my shadow talking. You know, it's the way that I reach you. Get over that. Get over being an idiot. Get over it. You know, just get past it and you'll be free. Oh, and it's tasty, isn't it? You know. Not only that, but I'm tricky. Hey, 7 years. I mean, it's not that quick. But get over it. You know? Just get over it. You'll get through it'll happen, it's okay. And then you'll be free. And then you get to that and I go, well, you know, you're just starting in a new process. And when you get through the next 7-year cycle, then you'll be free. When you do 14 years and we gather on the 14-year point, oh, I've got a good story for you. Wait, soon you'll be free. You'll die. The moment you're dead, I'll be right. You know, magic. Anyway, root center. Okay. Life on the material plane. Isn't it funny? It's such a good joke, I don't even know if I'll touch it. I'll just put it out there in the air. I'm going to start with the 58th gate. I'm going to start on the left-hand side because I want to start with the fact that one of the main pressures of the material plane is to use your intelligence to make money. And one of the great pressures of the root system as it points towards the splenic system is that the pressure to develop strategies, for survival. Now, one of the things to understand about the way in which material works is that is the way nature operates. If you're a bio-life form, you need to have a job. That is, you need to have a way in which you can fulfill your necessities as a bio-life form, whether you're an insect or a mammal or whatever the case may be. And the intelligence of creatures, we judge their intelligence by the sophistication of their strategies. You know, we're very impressed by a bird that will weave an extraordinary nest in order to attract its female, in order to be able to get the material requirements that it needs. You know, there's all of these strategies that are developed. And of course, when we come to being Homo sapien, when we come to our sophistication, we see that that's one of the main things about our success in terms of getting to the top of the food chain. You know, we got to the top of the food chain because we developed very, very sophisticated strategies. Intelligent strategies. And so when you're looking at the root center and you're looking at the root center pointing at the spleen, you're looking at the pressure to establish strategies. And you're looking at the pressure to establish three kinds of strategies. Strategies that lead to sharing. In other words, strategies that cannot unfold without sharing. Strategies that are empowered through mutation. And strategies that are developed as support mechanisms. In other words, just looking at circuit keynotes and seeing the circuit keynotes as defining factors in that substructure, if you will. So when we're dealing with the 58th gate, we're dealing with sharing strategies and the pressure to go along with sharing a strategy. This is the collective process. And normally shared strategies are the product of democratic voting. Even if that's a cabal that is, let's say, fascist or communist at the top of some kind of structure, within the cabal, there's a certain level of juggling, if you will, whatever the case may be. But very important to understand that it is the development of collective strategies that we find in the 58. And it tends to be what we get in our democratic societies. In other words, collective strategies for dealing with problems within our society and so forth and so on. Okay, so if we're dealing with a collective strategy, then one of the things to recognize about a pressure gate is that the way you make money is to get people to recognize that you're going to put them under pressure to find a strategy, a collective strategy for survival. In other words, you pressure them into the recognition that they need a strategy. Often that's educational. When we're looking at the 58th gate, we're looking at the joyous. If you look at the third line is electricity. Now, aside from the joke that, this is a post-1781 I Ching. This I Ching and electricity go hand in hand. And this is my joke that I started with. For me, it's one of the funnier lines. Because, of course, it has made it possible for most of the world to benefit materially, and it has made it possible for the head center to dominate the world. Think about that. Electricity has made it possible for the head center to dominate the world. I mean, when there were no books, before Gutenberg, when there was no generalized publishing, the head center was very weak. It wasn't a place of marketing. The real marketing in that era was totally different. But the moment that you have electricity, the moment that you have moving pictures and all of that stuff, you immediately create a head center oriented world in which inspiration is something that can be brought to everyone. So that electricity, though I don't want you to see it specifically as that, I really want you to get the sense of as well how material the third line is, and it carries so many bits and pieces of information about our material life. Okay, the individual whose electric vitality creates its own stimulation as not dependent on others. The energy to fuel independent stimulation. And it's one of the keys. Look, the 58th gate, all hexagrams are explained through their first line. It's the joy. It's one of the most beautiful lines. It's the love of life. And it's one of the things to understand. This electric vitality is that the only way to be able to work a collective strategy is that you can only sell a collective strategy by being electrically vital. I mean, this is the only way to sell a collective strategy. Look at our politicians. Look at what they're like. They're non-stop. They seem like they have more energy. It is amazing what the modern Western politician does all the time. Constantly putting under pressure through its very vitalization all kinds of strategies to try to get the collective to pay attention, to feel the pressure. We need this bill. We need to do this thing. I want to make you sure to understand that if we don't do this thing, then a horrible thing is going to happen to us. We need a new collective strategy. I mean, look at CNN every day. Now the concern isn't the war anymore, it's reconstruction. We need a collective strategy. Everybody's got to realize we need a collective strategy. And we need this for the collective strategy. And we need that for the collective strategy. And it's the selling of that. And that you can't sell collective strategy without the electricity of it. I'm going to put a chicken in every pot. Let's get to one of my favorites. We come to the 28th gate. I've been in love with the 28th gate all my life. 28th gate makes me...
38.
Oh yes, I was on the other side. Look at that, I got carried away. 38th gate. No, that was funny because there was a moment where I thought, maybe I should do the channel. And then I thought, no, I'd have to get into the channel and I don't want to do that. And so I ended up on the other side. I was in the spleen looking around. Okay, 38th gate. The 38th gate speaks for itself. If you are going, remember that the pressure centers and circuitry, we're dealing with two centers, have the same function. It's one of the things to recognize about the nature of truth, is that truth requires empowerment. Truth is empowering, but it also requires empowerment. That's why the truth can't stand alone. So truth is always looking for those that will accept the truth. The truth looking for confirmation. Mutation looking for recognition in that sense. And when you come to the root pressure of that, the strategy of that is fight. Fight. It's a struggle. It's a struggle to empower the truth. I've had a slogan that's run around in my head for years. Rumors fly, the truth crawls. It is just the way it is. Rumors fly, the truth crawls. Rumors are the part of the world that belongs to Solomon. That's the collective. The this and that, that's always the same. But truth belongs to mutation. And mutation requires empowerment. And empowerment is not easy. It's not. And in order to be able to be an empowering force, you need to be a fighter and you need to be deaf. Deaf. And yet, the third line of the 38, what does it say? It says the ability to sustain through integration with similar forces thus ensuring the vitality to persevere, the energy to integrate with others in times of struggle. Now I want you to grasp something. There is very little difference between business and war. There's very little difference. And there's as much bloodletting. Right? Same mechanisms. Right? Same mechanisms. Because it's all about the same thing. It's all about the material personified as territory. It's all about the same thing. You cannot empower alone. We've already seen that the truth can't stand alone. And we already have seen that individuals, we know that in design, individuals have a very difficult time integrating with others. Yet one of the things about the 2838 is that the 2838 gives integration its only capacity to be social. So it does have the capacity to be able to integrate with life like forces. And this is one of the things about alliance. Alliance is based on not those who will serve you, but those who will fight by your side. And this is very important to understand. They will fight by your side. They're not following you. You may be leading them, but they are fighting by your side, fighting their own battle in that sense. And we can also see that within the context of, what you're selling here, is that what you're selling is a pressure to recognize that you cannot bring truth out in the world alone. And truth, mutation, what's new, is a giant seller. Think about how we sell something that's new. We sell something that's new through testimonials. It's one of the most powerful selling techniques when you have something new. You got this new product and it's been tested on a group of 300 housewives. It's your new improved cleaning powder. And then you have those 300 housewives and you film them. And there's housewife number 92 saying, "Oh, this was wonderful. Little Johnny's shit used to stain," and on and on. "And now it's lily white and it's wonderfully clean and it's the best product that I've ever used. And not only that, it's all natural. The dog eats the box when it's over. Everything's fine." And then people out there are saying, hey, maybe I should go along with that. And the common struggle business. Think about all the pressure on people to join groups, organizations. Yeah, it's the 26th of May. This is anti-garbage day. Okay, everybody, let's gather for anti-garbage day. Let's struggle together on anti-garbage day. And people make a living from that. It's these so-called non-profit organizations. Oh, I got a bitch with non-profit organizations because the people who work for non-profit organizations make a profit. I mean, they do. They make their living, right? Yes, struggle along. You give me $10 and I'm going to look after that baby in Bangladesh. However, my salary takes $2. George's salary takes $3. The stuff we've got to buy is 18 cents. The shipping cost is, yeah, right. Let me sell you this one. Struggle with me. Let's free Mother Earth, It's the guru trip. It's all of those things. Come struggle with me. Give me your money. Stand beside me in the great fight. And by the way, I will profit. The struggle. See, the truth, to empower the truth. Such a thing. Right? And so you can see that the fight is there. And you got to sell the fight. This is new and improved. You've got to be by my side with this one. We've got to go out there together and tell them. We've got to get as many people as we can to sign the petition. And on and on and on. And when you look at the way in which organized empowerment works, you must understand that right now we have organizations in the world who are organized to empower the third and fourth world, who handle trillions of dollars every year. Trillions of dollars every year, of which an enormous amount simply goes to the bureaucracies of those organizations. And the funding of that is all about empowering, provoking people into supporting that. Stand beside me in the fight. So you've got these silly people who pay $10 for a Greenpeace thing that they can put on the back of their car. And you've got guys that are riding around in the Atlantic having parties waiting for nuclear ships to come by. And we make money doing this stuff. We do. Huh? I can't get stuck here. I'd like to get stuck here. But I can't get stuck here. I have 64 of these to do. I'm on a treadmill here. Got to check my timing. That's right. That's right. I'm not. I'm in de-extension period. All right, let's get to the 54th gate. Here is the ultimate material pressure. The marrying maiden, a concubine that rises up to be empress. What a story. And don't we love those stories? Rags to riches. And you see, it's true. It's built in. There's the 58 doing everything in its power to pressure people through its vitality, to have a collective shared blah, blah, blah. There's the individual trying to find forces of empowerment that will fight with it. And there's the 54 going, how do I get to the top? Let them do that shit. How do I get to the top? How do I get past all this? How do I get to the top? Right? Such pressure. Such pressure. The pressure to climb. There's this wonderful line in the original I Ching for the 54. It says, the moon is not full. It's a great comment. It's the story of the marrying maiden. And the story of the marrying maiden is that when you first meet the marrying maiden, you meet her as no moon, darkness. You don't know what she is. The mysteriousness of her femininity, nothing more, nothing less. And slowly the phases of the moon begin to open up. The moon is not yet full. Take this girl as your bride. Do not judge her for what you see in this limited light. The moon is not yet full. And in the fullness of that moon, in the maturity of the 54 as a force, you turn it around and it becomes a 45. It's a little piece of magic. You just turn the numbers around. You go from the 54 to the 45. And you have what it means to have the moon full. So the whole concept of ambition, what we know in the 54 is a line of ambition. The thing to recognize about ambition, it is the pressure to be given the chance to unfold. When you meet a 54, you're actually meeting a pressure that says, give me a chance to unfold. That's what you're meeting. And wait for my moon to be full before you judge me. Because only then will you see me in my beauty. It's a delight. That's why this gate carries with it the most mystical of lines, the fourth line. So when we're looking at the 54 and we look at the 3, we see covert interaction. Where would the making of money be without politics? Ah, bless Machiavelli. Eh? I mean, to really understand humanity is to transcend morality, to just see the movie. Here in covert action, the ability when stymied, when stopped, the ability when forces are in your way. Remember, the moon is not full yet. You may not be seen for your potential. The ability when stymied in formal relationships to use secret or purely informal channels when it is the only resort. Covert interaction. You cannot get to the top without leaving blood behind. So it goes. And you cannot get to the top without stepping on fingers as you climb that ladder. So it goes. And you don't get to the top without cheating in some way. So it goes. That is, if you're tribal. This is about support. And support is about the bargain. It's deal making. And the most important thing to see about the marrying maiden, it's the pressure to rise up through the bargain, through the deal. You know? Give me a starring role in the movie, I'll fuck you. You know? Give me this contract and I'll put something over here in a bank account somewhere for you. Sort of hidden, kind of, like that. Over there. You know? I mean, I can't get a building permit. Look, I'll give you this and you do that, and then we go around here, and we come back here, and we come kind of live.
But what's then the relation with the 54?
With the fourth line?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
54.
The 54-4. You're speaking...
Gate 50, fourth line.
Oh, yes, okay, we'll get there. Yeah, we'll get there. We won't miss it. When you're looking at the need for the deal, you have to see that this is the whole root of not entrepreneurism, not bureaucracy. The collective is inherently bureaucratic. It's inherently institutional. When you're looking at the individual, it's inherently entrepreneurial. But when you're looking at the tribe, you're looking at business. Business. In other words, you're looking at what emerged out of the traditional mon-pa business. You know, business. The natural expression of growth as an enterprise. Many people involved, starting off originally as just family structures, expanding beyond the competency of the family, bringing in outsiders, building factories, on and on and on. This is the nature of support. The nature of support is that it's all in a deal. It's all in a deal. Think about what happens when a company goes shopping for a community where it's going to build a factory. Whoa, you better believe that it's all about deals. Which community is going to give you the best tax break? You know, which community is going to let you buy the property for $1? You know, which community this, which community that? You know, it's all about, and how much support it's going to bring. We'll give you a better deal, but how many jobs are you going to provide? You know, are you going to give us 100 jobs? Are you going to give us 1,000 jobs? Are you going to give us 10,000 jobs? What is it going to mean that you bring this here in terms for us to give you the deal? It's all support, and it's all deal making, and it's all covert. And what I mean by that is I don't want to take it into the slimy end. You have everything after all. But covert is also something to recognize that in order to run an enterprise, there are hidden relationships. All enterprises have hidden relationships. Hidden relationships, for example, that are there in unions. And we will see unions the moment we come to the sacral. That's why when you look at workers, you know, if you look at 100% of all workers, you look at 70% are designed to work, and 30%, you know, can use not knowing when enough is enough to make money out of teaching people when enough is enough, that you've got the beginning of the labor movement. You know, the labor movement saying to generators, hey, look, stop being a slave at least all the time, you know? You don't have to work 10 hours a day. You can work 8 hours a day. Let's have a 4-day week. Let's have this. Let's have that. Let's have blah, 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 blah. And there's the open sacral selling the sacral on. Enough is enough. Don't be a slave. Don't work so hard. So forth and so on. We'll get there. I'm talking about something else here. The context of this is that within any enterprise, there are political cabals. What the employees say about the boss behind the boss's back. The special arrangement that the boss has with one employee that it doesn't have with the other. The this and that that's part of all the mechanisms of a complex support-oriented enterprise. And it's a pressure. So think about the selling of this. This is this is where you get in this line what's so interesting. You get the use secret or purely informal channels. Secret. This is where you have, the analyst that brings you, the consultant that brings you deep insights. This is where, for example, the value of, let's say, knowing somebody's design, can give you leverage. In other words, that it's not just about making blind deals. It's about developing deal strategies and strategies that are based on insider knowledge. That's why, for example, we get insider investment scandals, because it's part of a buried deal somewhere, in terms of somebody being able to get to the top and make an extraordinary amount of money on the sale of a sinking stock before it's shot. It's just there. Okay, so we've got these 3 root gates, and they're pointed towards the spleen. And what we know from those 3 root gates is all of them are pressuring the need for strategies of one kind or another. Collective strategy, entrepreneurial strategy, business strategy, and products and services and fears associated with that. And whenever you're dealing with the gates of an awareness center, understand that you're going to be the most successful when anything you wrap is wrapped around fear. Trying to get rid of fear is a life business. Everybody at some level or another is trying to get rid of fear desperately, And so each and every one of these root pressures pointed towards the spleen is there to help you find ways to overcome your fear. And in overcoming that fear, to be able to be successful in the development of those various types of strategies. All right, let's move to the other side and let's see the transformation. That is the transformation when we move from the splenic side that is inherently aware, spontaneous, well-being, you're pressuring intelligence strategies. Let's go to the other side, and what you're pressuring here is the emotional system and all of its various principles. And of course, one of the most important things about the emotional system is the selling of pleasure. And this is something deeply to understand. Everything